Everything appeared hopeless in a tiny, deserted town tucked away on the brink of a rough, unforgiving border, and even the future. But from that same location, an entire country was rocked. As we reflect on this story, subscribe, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell for more daily stories that need to be heard. Hit that subscribe button. 12-year-old girl's letter to the president. Might one tiny deed inspire hope and change the course of hundreds of lives? There are places that aren't shown on maps, but it's in these corners that the most heartbreaking stories take place. The small town near the southern border was once a peaceful home to hundreds of families, but now it is shrouded in shadows. This is the story of Emma, a young girl who put all of her hope into a single sheet of paper, sparking a light in a world draped in darkness. Emma was just 12 years old, and she saw lonely streets, tightly closed doors, and danger lurking around every corner. Old had grown up in the ruins of her hometown. Her father, a truck driver with a reputation for honesty, was once well liked in the community, but his integrity came at a high cost. One day, the town's criminals killed her father on his doorstep because he refused to transport goods for them. After her father's death, Emma and her mother lived in constant terror and vigilance since the town was under Ruthless's iron grip. Emma's mother advised her not to look outside or cry because silence was the only way to survive, but Emma didn't want to live that way any longer. Criminals did exist, but they were no longer genuinely alive, and anyone who attempted to flee or rebelled was swiftly punished. One peaceful evening, Emma couldn't take it any longer. She sat down, opened a piece of paper, and started writing in the soft light of an oil lamp. I don't know if this letter will ever reach you, but if no one takes action, nothing will ever change. Emma carefully folded the letter and tucked it into her pocket. The following morning, Emma walked to the bus stop to ask for help. "Dear Mr. President, if you are reading this letter, please help us. This town is no longer a home. The adults are terrified, and we the children have no future. Locate the one person she could rely on to deliver it." He glanced at her as the final bus driver to leave the town. Emma firmly nodded as he asked, "Are you sure sending this letter is like gambling with your life?" His eyes were filled with reluctance and fear. "I am at a loss for decisions." Emma's letter and her brittle hope that a little note from a young girl's heart could possibly change the course of a town engulfed in darkness were carried by the bus as it rumbled out of town. The letter passed through several hands, including the bus driver and a postal clerk in a nearby town, before ending up in the hands of an experienced reporter who had dedicated his professional life to unearthing lost tales, and when he read the letter, the shaking his calligraphy chilled him. Every letter pricked a nerve. A young girl wrote this and said to a coworker, "We adults have been silent for too long, but this little girl won't accept it." On a calm morning, Emma's letter and the journalist's report arrived on the president's desk. The journalist promptly wrote a thorough exposé revealing the terrible facts about the town and sent it to a friend who was a senior national security advisor at the White House. The audience was hushed as he read the straightforward but sincere remarks. "Please, if you are reading this Mr. President letter, kindly assist us. Our town is dying in the dark." The president put the letter down, his eyes heavy with reflection, and turned to his advisors. "Greeley, how could this happen in our country?" he asked. "This region is highly complex, the local government is nearly powerless, and criminal gangs operate with impunity. Intervention here is very risky," said a senior advisor cautiously. "If a child has the courage to seek for help, we must have the courage to act." The president straightened in his chair and sharpened his gaze. Plans were put into action right away within 48 hours of the federal government. Agencies started acting. A covert investigation team was dispatched to the town masquerading as residents to gather information about smuggling routes, secret storage, and dishonest officials. As the undercover team entered the town, they soon learned that the situation was much more complex. The town wasn't just controlled by one gang, but was a crucial hub in a vast transnational criminal network assisted by complicit local officials. A special task force prepared for a raid on the gang's headquarters, and in the meantime, a reconstruction unit from the Department of Urban Development planned emergency support, including infrastructure repairs and essential supplies for the residents. The report sent to the president carried a stark warning. "Mr. President, this is not just a besieged town, it's a vital component of a significant trafficking operation, and failure here might have dire repercussions." The president, Emma, reacted with unwavering resolve, saying, "We are not just fighting criminals, we are fighting to restore faith. I will not let Emma or any child wait another moment longer." Meanwhile, in the town, Emma was unaware of the plans going on around her. All she knew was that her mother was becoming more and more nervous. One night, as Emma looked out her window, she noticed strange figures lurking in the shadowy corners of the streets. Something was changing, but Emma wasn't sure if this was a sign of hope or the prelude to an impending storm. Secret investigating teams carried on with their covert work while the community was still in a state of terror. Slowly, the pieces of the puzzle started to fit together as the narrow alleys blended into crowds, meticulously recording the gang's operations, smuggling routes, hidden warehouses, and even the corrupt officials helping the criminals. However, Ramon, the ruthless leader of the gang, noticed that something was amiss. The once shy townspeople now dared to look at him, heightening his instincts that they were up to something. He hissed, scanning his underlings, scanning his keen eyes, saying, "If we don't act first, everything will fall apart." The sound of truck engines reverberated through the quiet. At night, when Ramon gave the order to kidnap a number of townspeople in order to convey a cruel message, anyone helping outsiders would pay with their lives in the dead of night. Emma was awakened by a commotion and ran to her window, her pulse racing, her eyes wide with fear, watching as her mother was pulled into a truck. Emma shouted, but the darkness smothered her cries. Emma took a deep breath, gripped the cardigan tightly, and stood resolutely, "I can't wait," as the house stood eerily still, her mother's cardigan draped over a chair, serving as a chilling reminder of her helplessness. Emma marched directly to the temporary headquarters of the inquiry team where residents of brave towns had started collaborating with the authorities. She went to the commander with unwavering eyes. "I know where they took my mom. I can help," she said firmly. The commander paused when he saw a young warrior full of courage and resolve instead of a child. He gave a small newt, saying, "We'll save everyone, but you must promise to follow our instructions under the cover of night unmarked." Automobiles entered the town, and the task team prepared for a decisive mission that would not only free the captives, but also destroy Ramon's entire criminal network. Meanwhile, Ramon, accompanied by his men, lifted his glass smugly, unaware that the task force had encircled each escape route. The front door burst wide, and black-clad figures rushed in like a hurricane. Ramon yelled, "Take them down!" Gunfire broke out, piercing the shadows, and agents quickly secured room after room. However, Ramon, ever sly, slipped into a secret passageway and tried to escape through an underground tunnel. But Emma, remembering the routes her father frequently took, led the agents to obstruct Ramon's last escape stop. "Drop your weapon." An agent sneered, raising his gun, but before he could fire, a precise shot brought him down, collapsing to the ground. When Emma's mother and the other hostages were released, the agent declared, snapping handcuffs onto his wrists. Their hands were still shaking in terror as they left the gang's hideout. But as they stepped, when Emma's mother saw her daughter from a distance, her eyes glowed with pride and love as she ran toward Emma, putting her arms around her and whispering, "You did it! You've brought light to all of us." The tears streaming down their faces were no longer tears of pain, but relief. Emma grinned, but she kept her mouth shut because she understood that everyone shared in this victory because Dawn shattered it. Heavy silent trucks loaded with building supplies and equipment were used to transport Ramon and his surviving goons out of town, and teams of specialists started to arrive, indicating a new, and for the long-suffering community, the daybreak provided an almost strange feeling for the first time in years. People cautiously left their homes, their eyes full of doubt, as if they were afraid that this newfound peace was nothing more than a passing dream. The town felt unrecognizable. The gunfire had stopped, and the shadows of fear were starting to fade, but the air was still heavy with uncertainty. Despite the continuous relief efforts, the atmosphere was heavy as Emma stood in the town square with her little hand tightly gripping her mother's. Federal personnel started distributing clean water, food, and medical supplies. A federal official ascended the steps of the town's oldest structure. He raised his hand to demand stillness, and his voice echoed with resolve, saying, "We're not simply here to rescue you. We're here to assist you in rebuilding your lives. However, this will only be successful if everyone works together." An old guy spoke up, his voice shaking but full of emotion. "I used to believe that keeping quiet would keep us secure, but after living in terror for so long, I've come to the realization that silence isn't the solution. I'm not sure where to begin, but if we band together, we can make it happen." A former shopkeeper rose to speak. "I need assistance in order to reopen my store." "Do it," someone else said. "If you need paint, I can help. Together we can reconstruct everything." Door by door, brick by brick, as Emma sat next to her mother and listened to the conversations going on around her, she felt for the first time that the town's residents had a renewed sense of quiet hope as the community banded together to rebuild the town government. Construction crews toiled diligently alongside them, repairing roads, rebuilding schools, and starting the hospital's recovery. When a Department of Urban Development employee saw Emma sketching on a wall one afternoon, he sat down next to her and inquired, "What are you drawing?" Emma gestured toward a colorful sunrise over a clear blue sky. She responded, "I'm envisioning our future, a time when we won't have to be afraid." The employee nodded with a small smile. "You're right about crossing his face, but we all depend on one another to make that future a reality, don't we?" Emma returned the smile and spoke steadily. "We can't do it alone, but if everyone works together, everything will change in a matter of weeks." The town started to renovate stores, reopen schools ready to receive students again, and hear children laughing through freshly fixed streets. The community center, a once disrepairable structure, was renovated and turned into a gathering place for events and celebrations. Over its entrance, the town's residents hung a brave together sign, "We get up and stand next to her mother." Emma looked up at the sign as an older woman walked slowly up and took Emma's mother, knelt down and gave her a tight hug. The woman said softly, "We used to think we were powerless, but you've reminded us that even in the darkest times, we can find light." Emma smiled, her voice firm but gentle, and as the sunset drenched the town in golden light, Emma sat next to her mural of the sunrise, her eyes fixed on the horizon, full of hope for a future. Emma's mother said, "You've done more than I ever imagined possible, where the town was a place full of life and laughter, rather than a forgotten shadow the following." This month, the once dark town saw a remarkable transformation. The once silent streets were now alive with stories and laughter, and doors that had long been closed stood open to welcome new beginnings at Town Square. A special ceremony brought everyone together, and the crowd gathered with bright eyes before the newly restored building, now known as the Emma Community Center. A helicopter landed and brought in an unexpected guest. The president emerged amid gasps of surprise, and without a grand entourage or lengthy speeches, he stood humbly among those who had previously believed they had forgotten. The town's story is a reminding us all that he started with a modest deed, and that one spark, when nourished, may light up a whole community. Today, he turned to Emma, who was standing next to her mother with her eyes shining, and said, "You've taught us a lesson we must never forget, that a courageous heart can change the world." That day, the town's residents laid the first bricks for a new school, a new hospital, and numerous other reconstruction projects. It wasn't just about physical restoration. It was about re-aiming the faith and hope they had lost for so long. The young girl turned into a representation of change. Her message was proudly displayed in the community after being framed. Emma and her friends ran and played on the freshly paved streets, their laughter echoing throughout the town. The American flag fluttered in the golden sunlight, a potent symbol of a new beginning, where hope and belief could flourish once more. The town's once collapsing wall was painted with the bold phrase, "We have found the light," as a reminder that great change frequently begins with small acts. Together, they knew they could make the world a better place.